You've read the productivity hacks. You've tried the Pomodoro technique. You've even guilt-tripped yourself into starting tasks, only to collapse into another Netflix binge. But what if procrastination isn't just a bad habit? What if it's a psychological rebellion against your own potential? Here's a disturbing truth. Chronic procrastinators' brains show identical activity patterns to those of people with clinical anxiety. Avoidance isn't laziness. It's a neurological defense mechanism. Even Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who famously declared, "Become who you are," nearly failed his degree because he couldn't finish his thesis on time. His solution, a radical method that didn't rely on willpower, but on rewiring your subconscious dread of achievement. Today, we're merging Nietzsche's 19th-century philosophy with cutting-edge neuroscience to expose the 13 dark psychological levers that finally cure procrastination. Some of these will unsettle you. One might even feel unethical, until you realize it's how your brain already manipulates you into stagnation. Let's begin. Number 1. The procrastination lie. Think about the last time you procrastinated. What did you tell yourself? I work better under pressure? I just need to be in the right mood? Here's the uncomfortable truth. You weren't lying to others. You were lying to yourself. A 2023 study in psychological science found that 88% of chronic procrastinators genuinely believe their own excuses, until researchers hooked them to fMRI machines. The results? Every time they delayed a task, their brain's anterior cingulate cortex, the conflict detector, lit up like a panic alarm. Procrastination isn't time management failure. It's an identity protection racket. Nietzsche called this the lie of the domesticated mind. In his notes, he scribbled, "The laziest man isn't the one who does nothing, but the one who's perpetually about to act." Why? Because procrastination lets you preserve the fantasy of your potential. Starting means risking failure, and failure means confronting who you really are. Ever notice how you'll deep clean your kitchen to avoid writing that proposal? That's your brain sabotaging productivity to maintain your self-delusion. But there's a way out, and it begins with a single realization. The failure paradox, 300 words. Here's a psychological trap you might not see coming. The more you fear failure, the more you procrastinate, and the more you procrastinate, the more you guarantee failure. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy disguised as a safety net. A Harvard study tracked MBA students over a decade and found something disturbing. The chronic procrastinators weren't less capable. In fact, they often tested higher in raw intelligence. But they sabotaged themselves by creating artificial crises. Why? Because if you wait until the last minute to write a paper and get a B-, you can tell yourself, "Well, I barely tried." That's easier than admitting, "I gave it my all, and it wasn't enough." Nietzsche saw this centuries before psychology had a name for it. He wrote, "The serpent that cannot shed its skin perishes." Procrastination is the psychological equivalent of refusing to molt. You'd rather stay cramped in an old identity than risk the vulnerability of growth. But here's the twist. Your brain knows this is a scam. That's why procrastination feels so rotten. It's not just guilt. It's the quiet horror of watching yourself betray your own potential. So how do you break the cycle? The answer isn't discipline. It's strategic self-deception. And that's where Nietzsche's most counterintuitive trick comes in. The future self, betrayal. Your brain treats your future self like a stranger. And that's why you keep screwing them over. A groundbreaking Yale study proved this by scanning procrastinators' brains while they made decisions. When asked about tasks due today, their prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational choices, fired normally. But when considering deadlines weeks away, their brain activity looked identical to when they thought about other people's problems. Nietzsche predicted this too. In Beyond Good and Evil, he wrote, "Man is the cruelest animal to himself. He postpones his pain until it becomes a weapon." Every time you say, "I'll do it tomorrow," you're not just delaying work, you're committing psychological violence against your future self. But here's where it gets eerie. Researchers at UCLA found that people who visualize their future selves in detail, down to their wrinkles and life circumstances, procrastinated 42% less. Why? Because you don't steal from someone you recognize. This explains why guilt trips don't work. Your brain dismisses abstract lectures about responsibility. but it can't ignore a vivid mental image of your exhausted, 3 a.m. caffeine, crashing future self cursing your name. So the real question isn't, how do I stop procrastinating? It's, how do I make my future self feel real? And the answer involves the mirror technique. This is Nietzsche's brutal but strangely effective visualization hack from his 1887 journals, now supported by modern neuroscience. Stand naked in front of a mirror at dawn. Before you brush this off as dramatic or outdated, consider why it works. A study from the University of Amsterdam found that people who confronted their own reflection before deciding whether to procrastinate showed 37 more task engagement. When you meet your own eyes in the mirror, your brain can't pretend your future self doesn't exist. It becomes real. But Nietzsche didn't stop there. He pushed this further into ritual. He believed you had to do 3 things. Speak your intention out loud to your reflection. Today, I will write 1,000 words. Say the consequence of failure. If I don't, I'll disappoint the person standing in front of me. Touch the mirror to seal the pact. This physical action triggers your brain's somatic markers, making the intention feel embodied. This isn't mystical fluff. It's psychological warfare. At King's College London, researchers tested a modern version using smartphone cameras. The results were startling. Looking into your own eyes activates the insula cortex, the brain region responsible for self-awareness and even disgust. Speaking intentions aloud creates memory anchors 3 times stronger than silent thoughts. Touching the screen or mirror activates your sensor-motor system, which makes the promise feel real. You might ask, but do I really have to be naked? Fair. It's not essential. What matters is unavoidable self-confrontation. The nudity just amplifies vulnerability. You can replicate the effect by recording a 10-second video of yourself making a personal vow using apps like Reflectly with aging filters that show you what your future self could become. Even just staring into your phone's black screen while speaking your intention works. The goal is to trigger something psychologists call an accountability hallucination. That brief moment when your brain forgets the reflection is you and treats it like a witness. That's when the spell of procrastination breaks. Final twist? A 2024 study reported something eerie. Some users swore their reflections subtly nodded or frowned. Of course, that's impossible, right? Number 2. Nietzsche's Bermensch fix. Here's a psychological grenade. What if procrastination isn't your enemy, but your highest self, distorted and desperate, trying to break free? Nietzsche believed this force wasn't laziness. It was the Übermensch in chains, a more evolved, future version of you resisting submission to mediocrity. The part of you that refuses to spend your only life checking boxes, pleasing bosses, or doing work that lacks soul. Modern science is just now catching up. In a 2024 Stanford meta-study, researchers observed chronic procrastinators over 6 months. The surprising twist? When participants were assigned tasks that deeply aligned with their values, projects that mattered to them personally, their procrastination patterns didn't just improve. They reversed. Delay turned to obsession. Avoidance flipped to flow. These weren't slackers. They were misdirected idealists. High-capacity minds rejecting work that felt beneath them. Nietzsche saw this decades before neuroscience had a name for it. In one of his notebooks, he wrote, "Procrastination is the soul's silent strike against the slavery of trivial pursuits." This is where most productivity systems collapse. They treat procrastination like a virus to be eliminated. But Nietzsche proposed something more radical. Don't fix it. Amplify it strategically. Imagine this. That inner voice telling you to delay? It's not sabotaging you. It's scanning for something more worthy of your fire. It's your intuition whispering, "This task doesn't deserve your full power." And the answer isn't to silence that voice. It's to promote it. Let your resistance become your filter. Let it reject what's unworthy. Let it guard your potential like a dragon protects treasure. Here's the paradox. You procrastinate not because you're weak, but because something in you refuses to pretend to care about tasks that don't matter. That's not dysfunction. That's misused discernment. So what would happen if you let that discerning force take the wheel? This is where the concept of the Übermensch becomes useful, not as some ego-fueled ideal, but as a personal archetype. A version of you that holds nothing back, that says yes only to what's aligned, and no to everything that drains. Nietzsche believed the Übermensch doesn't seek balance. He seeks intensity, meaning, and clarity. His work isn't busy, it's inevitable. So, instead of asking, how can I make myself do this task? Try asking, would the future, highest version of me waste time on this? If the answer is no, burn it. If the answer is yes, devour it. Procrastination in this frame isn't an obstacle. It's a compass, but only if you stop resisting and start listening. This doesn't mean everything you delay is meaningless. Sometimes the fear of failure hides inside your delay. Sometimes your ego disguises insecurity as boredom. So how do you tell the difference? Simple. Track what you procrastinate on versus what you lose time doing without effort. Do you avoid writing but lose hours designing your ideas visually? Do you delay reading but get sucked into deep podcasts about the same topic? Do you postpone emails but obsess over creating your own frameworks? These aren't distractions. They're breadcrumbs. They point toward your natural flow, your native genius, where your inner Übermensch is already working without permission. Nietzsche would argue that your future self is trying to pull you forward, and procrastination is how it protests being pulled sideways. And here's where things get deeper. You've been told to kill procrastination with willpower. Nietzsche would say, rebuild your life so that what you delay no longer exists. If you hate spreadsheets, why keep chasing jobs that demand them? If you stall at editing videos, why build a business where that's the core? If you dread writing reports, why design a life where that's your deliverable? Your resistance isn't random. It's a diagnosis. And your procrastination isn't just rejection. It's redirection. Here's an exercise Nietzsche might approve of. The Übermensch audit: list 5 things you've been procrastinating on for over a month. For each one, write, would my future, fully expressed self give energy to this? Burn or delete the ones that don't pass. Now, write one bold action that your future self would start today, even if imperfectly. Because the goal isn't to beat procrastination. The goal is to evolve out of the life that created it. That's Nietzsche's path. Not motivation, but transformation. He believed you don't become who you are by pushing harder. You become it by burning off what you are not. And procrastination? It's just the smoke from everything that's no longer meant for you. Part 2. The arsonist strategy: most productivity systems want you to outsmart your procrastination. Nietzsche's take? Don't tame it, set it on fire. Here's how it works. The next time you catch yourself avoiding a task, don't resist it. Grab a blank sheet of paper and write, I'm avoiding this task because underserved beneath me. Be brutally honest. Then burn the paper. This may sound like performance art, but it's actually neural alchemy. A 2023 study published in Nature Human Behavior revealed that destroying written thoughts physically reduces activity in the amygdala, your brain's fear center, by 40, releases dopamine in the reward pathways of the brain, specifically the substantia nigra, creates a phenomenon called symbolic commitment binding, where your brain treats the ritual as a serious decision. Nietzsche didn't just theorize this, he lived it. After nearly failing his university thesis, he wrote, the page that burns cleanest carries the truth heaviest. The anti-goal protocol. Nietzsche once hinted at a chilling insight, one that modern science is finally starting to confirm. Procrastination isn't overcome by setting goals, but by tearing them down. In 2024, the University of Chicago's Procrastination Research Lab discovered that traditional goal setting actually activates the brain's threat response system. Your amygdala sees deadlines like submit by Friday not as motivation, but as danger. So what's the alternative? Nietzsche would suggest reverse-engineered deadlines. Step 1. Write your failure first. Open a document titled, How I Will Fail at This Task. Then describe your worst-case procrastination outcome in raw, embarrassing detail. Example, I'll watch trash TV until 3 a.m., then submit a half-baked disaster. Step 2. Pre-spend your shame. Post this failure script somewhere you'll see it daily. Your mirror, your phone wallpaper. This works like a psychological vaccine. Repeated exposure builds resistance to the behavior. Step 3. Let your contempt push you forward when you feel yourself slipping. Reread your script. Let the pre-written shame burn. Nietzsche said, "Nothing burns longer than the shame we preemptively swallow." Stanford neuroscientists tested this technique and found it reduced task avoidance by 68, compared to just 22 for traditional SMART goals. It also triggers the anterior midcingulate cortex, a part of the brain linked to willpower and emotional endurance. Why this works when everything else doesn't: it hijacks your inner rebel. You instinctively avoid what you've written down as failure. It turns shame into fuel, not fallout, and it makes moving forward feel like an escape, not a chore. The transvaluation trick. This is the moment where Nietzsche's deep philosophy collides with modern neuroscience and becomes something you can actually use. The final step in overcoming procrastination isn't about fighting it or forcing productivity. It's about transformation, turning procrastination into a hidden superpower and using it as your edge. A groundbreaking 2024 study from MIT revealed that when participants were taught to reinterpret procrastination symptoms, like a racing heart or sudden avoidance, not as fear or laziness but as excitement for meaningful work, their productivity skyrocketed by 300. This technique, called anxiety reappraisal, has now become a popular tool in psychology, but Nietzsche had already grasped its essence more than a century ago. To apply this, use the Übermensch Reframe Protocol, a practical set of steps designed to reshape your experience of procrastination. First, try the body hack. When you feel the urge to delay, stand like a superhero, feet apart, hands on hips, chest lifted. Then, say aloud, "This isn't fear. It's my genius demanding worthy challenges." A Cambridge study shows this simple pose boosts testosterone by 20 and improves cortisol regulation by 35, making you feel more in control. Next, apply the Nietzschean deadline twist. Instead of setting goals like, "Finish the report by Friday," reframe it to, "By Friday, I will have proven how easily I conquer mediocre tasks." This phrasing activates dominant circuits in the brain, replacing stress with pride and power. Another powerful practice is procrastination journaling. Don't just track what you're avoiding, track what you're choosing instead. Within a few days, patterns emerge. Often, what we label as procrastination is actually a conscious shift toward more meaningful growth. Nietzsche once wrote, "The noble soul selects its distractions as carefully as its battles." On the neurological level, this works because your brain begins to reclassify overwhelming tasks as beneath you, not impossible. Dopamine, the motivation chemical, starts flowing toward challenges rather than away from them. And your locus coeruleus, the brain's alarm system, stops reacting with anxiety and starts amplifying excitement. To support this shift, modern tools now exist. Some browser extensions like Übermensch Mode rewrite deadlines into motivational challenges. There are also AI productivity coaches trained on Nietzsche's ideas that reframe your task list with philosophical edge. Even biometric wearables can now detect your procrastination patterns and trigger motivational audio, such as clips from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, to snap you into focus. And the most poetic twist? MIT researchers found that users of this method often develop the opposite of procrastination. They start delaying distractions, not tasks, because they crave the feeling of deep, meaningful work. Nietzsche saw it coming. In his final sane writings, he said, "The greatest heights are reached by those who no longer need to climb but soar." Number 3, the 90-second rule. Your brain has a secret trick, and procrastination knows how to use it. Scientists at Johns Hopkins found that you have a 90-second window between the moment you feel like avoiding something and the moment you actually decide to avoid it. The scary part? Most people lose the fight in the first 3 seconds. Nietzsche sensed this long ago. In 1881, he wrote, "The biggest battles happen not over hours, but in the single breath between thinking and acting." Now, modern brain scans prove he was right. Procrastination isn't just a habit. It's a sudden hijack of your brain. Here's what happens in those 90 seconds. First 15 seconds. Your brain's fear center, the amygdala, feels stress or discomfort. Next 30 seconds. Your willpower tries to take control. Final 45 seconds. You either win or get lost in distractions, but here's the trick. A study from the University of Tokyo found that at 22 seconds, your brain is the most open to change. So the key isn't willpower. It's catching that tiny moment before you lose control. The 22-second trick to beat procrastination when you feel like avoiding a task. Don't ignore it. For the first 15 seconds, say this out loud. I see you, fear. This helps your brain notice the feeling instead of running from it. Now from 16 to 21 seconds, do this simple breathing trick. Breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold your breath, and press your thumbs and index fingers together tightly. For 3 seconds, breathe out through your mouth and say, ha, as you exhale. For 4 seconds, then comes the most important moment. At 22 seconds, snap your fingers with your non-dominant hand, the one you don't usually use. Say a weird or funny word like Zarathustra out loud, and right after that, start your task. But only for 30 seconds. A 2024 study by UCLA found this strange method actually works. It helps your brain in 3 big ways. It calms down the fear part of your brain, it wakes up the part of your brain that helps you think clearly, and it gives you just enough of a push to get started. The Navy SEAL Midnight Protocol. While Nietzsche wrote about mental strength, Navy SEALs trained it for war. They learned that procrastination and battle hesitation use the same brain circuits, so they developed a fast and intense routine. Here's how their 90-second rule works. First 30 seconds. Shock your system, dip your face in ice-cold water or snap a rubber band on your wrist. While humming your national anthem, this wakes up your brain and resets your decision center. Next 30 seconds. Move fast, do 5 quick push-ups, or modified ones, or jog in place for 15 seconds. This burns off the stress hormone cortisol. Last 30 seconds. Hijack your thinking, say this out loud. This task is my enemy. In 90 seconds, either it's dead or I am. Then do the task for just 2 minutes with full energy. DARPA studies showed this method. Increased task starting by 400. Even for unmotivated people, built momentum that lasted 47 minutes, literally rewired habits in the brain. The psychology behind it. SEALs don't try to get motivated. They act like it's life or death. MIT even tested this on civilians. Many felt strangely excited to start tasks they usually avoided. The 7 exception. Here's a hard truth. About 7 of people have a brain that doesn't respond to regular motivation. A 2024 study by Cambridge and Max Planck Institute found these people have a rare gene, COMT-Val158-MET, that makes their dopamine system too efficient. In simple words, they can't scare themselves into action. Nietzsche's solution? Strategic self-sabotage. The anti-productivity method. Block your escape routes. Use apps like LeechBlock to make distractions harder than work. Make a public bet. If I don't finish by Friday, I donate to a cause I hate. Create fake pressure. Hire someone to pretend to be your productivity coach. Use money apps like StickK where failure costs you cash. The nuclear option. Write your resignation letter and give it to a friend with instructions. Mail this if I don't finish my work on time. Why it works. Triggers your brain's fear of loss, which is stronger than the hope of reward. Activates the part of the brain that predicts disappointment. What Nietzsche called creative desperation. Modern versions. Nuke your life. Apps that enforce extreme accountability. AI bots that threaten your job reputation. Even paid bounty hunters who pressure you to finish work. The wildest part. After 6 months, 89 of these unmotivatable people didn't need tricks anymore. Their brains had rewired themselves. As one test subject said, "Now I finally understand why normal people fear deadlines, and it honestly scares me." Number 4. Turning perfectionism into power. Perfectionists are some of the biggest procrastinators. But the reason isn't what most people think. In 2024, Harvard researchers did brain scans of people who called themselves perfectionists. And what they found was surprising. When perfectionists say, "It's not good enough yet," they aren't being careful or hardworking. They're actually avoiding the task. Here's what the brain scans showed. 42 less activity in creative parts of the brain, compared to regular procrastinators. 300 more activity in the part of the brain that fears being judged. A strange brain loop that turns big goals into total freeze. Nietzsche understood this long ago, even before science could prove it. He wrote, "The will to be perfect is really the will to never even start." Here's the scary part. Your perfectionism isn't about doing your best. It's about controlling how others see you. By never finishing your work, you protect your dream version of yourself. You think, if I don't complete it, people can't judge me. But what if you could flip this? What if you used your perfectionism not to avoid action, but to fuel it?